David Bowie was not a Stone Age man, but he was a prophet. He was a philosopher, a modern-day Zarathustra, who came to deliver us from the emptiness, the dreariness, the heteronormative fetters of English suburban life. However, Bowie was not concerned with the love of wisdom, philosophy's lodestone. Rather, and to use Emmanuel Levinas's phrase, Bowie is better understood as a storehouse of a wisdom of love, and therefore as a philosopher who grants priority to ethics, which centres otherness, over ontology, which centres self. Western philosophy has tended to neglect love in favour of a preoccupation with the question of death, one's solitary relationship to an inevitable end. While Bowie had much to say about death, including his own, I will focus on what I take to be a more central theme in his work, one that sets itself against law, love. In linking Bowie with love, I'm not interested in his romantic involvements, albeit these often reveal a high degree of curiosity and openness in the face of difference. Rather, the Bowie-love nexus to be considered concerns itself with agape, a Greco-Christian term capturing the idea of a love for humanity, a universal and unconditional love, or at least a striving toward it. While it need not bear a theological meaning, in the Christian sense, it refers to the love of God, or Christ, for mankind. Now, given Bowie's well-known interest in Nietzsche, an appeal to the idea of agape might seem misplaced. After all, Nietzsche viewed agape as Christianity's corruption and repudiation of life itself, as a deadly war waged against the higher type of man. However, and while Bowie might be viewed as an artistic exemplar of this Nietzschean figure, a heralding of the overman is ultimately peripheral to his music and art. While he shared Nietzsche's desire to affirm life and human creativity, as well as his perspectivism and antipathy toward a herd mentality, it is self-effacement that lies at the centre of Bowie's corpus. It is his paring back of self, and therefore the other-directed nature of his artistic fecundity that render him a useful vehicle for exploring the idea of agape. For as Max Scheler notes, agape is a love that opens human beings to the world, to what is other, and therefore to a superabundant vitality. Bowie love is a going beyond oneself to ever richer meaning through community and connection. It does not involve Nietzsche's elitist, self-loving higher man who, in his solitude, remains indifferent to others and to their suffering. On the contrary, and in this latter respect, Bowie has more in common with the spirit of the New Testament than Nietzsche's Antichrist. Like Jesus, he cries, "I am with you always." Or, more poetically, thus, Bowie love is not Nietzsche's tough love. While it is not an easy thing as we shall see, it does not view compassion, something Nietzsche viewed as more dangerous than any vice, to be antithetical to the creative spirit. Nor is it a matter of self-reverence, and it is certainly not about assuming the place of God. That is, Bowie does not advance an ethics of self-deification. Indeed, as we will see, Bowie rejected the idea of man-God as heathen, as a thoroughly wrong term. Ultimately, while Nietzsche viewed suspension of the instinct of self-preservation to be calamitous, a fatality, Bowie squandered himself time and again in overflowing, other-directed creativity. While agape might suggest the divine, and while some of Bowie's music and art can be understood as a dialogue with God, the Bowie-love nexus to be developed here remains an earthly affair. While it begins from the premise one cannot love anybody without turning away from oneself, it focuses not on the couple, but is a love that radiates out. However, it does involve foregrounding philosopher Alan Badiou's distinction between identity and difference. For like Badiou, Bowie sought to privilege difference over identity, mobile otherness over static selfhood, love over law. As Badiou has explained, love's main enemy, the one that must be defeated, is not the other, it is myself. The myself that prefers identity to difference, that prefers to impose its world against the world reconstructed through the filter of difference. David Bowie always reconstructed the world through the filter of difference. Not the difference of a specific love object, the beloved, but through difference at large. It is through these reconstructed worlds of sound and vision that he established affective relations with fans. Through his music, lyrics, and performances, Bowie embraced an idea of love, one we might describe as agape, but certainly one that centers difference and offered it to fans as a choice. This love speaks to the freedom to become, to develop, to change, and of course, to disappoint, for loss is always a part and consequence of love. Freedom here is used in Michel Foucault's sense to mean the possibility of being otherwise. To this end, Bowie transports us from imagined necessity to a world of human and post-human possibilities. That is, through otherworldly constructions and through showing us their seams, Bowie demystified the world, teased the ideological out into the open. As he stated in 1999, I embrace the idea there's a demystification process going on between the artist and the audience. It is the ideological, the social norms we have internalized, ones that insufficiently value difference, that hold us back, that make the possibility of love recede. And it is to the undoing of these social norms, which parade as necessity, that Bowie directed his art. In this sense, Bowie's art addresses the very ground of an interconnection between love and freedom. Further, And while transgression may be one mode through which social norms are challenged, it is not law-breaking as such that is key for Bowie. Rather, it is the undermining of law, the order of things, the socially and culturally taken for granted, that proves crucial. To this end, Bowie preferred the parodic, the absurd, over the oppositional fuck you politics of, for example, punk. As Richard Fitch has observed, he created worlds where all social norms and rules have been suspended. In doing so, he provided glimpses of possible futures and a portal onto the love necessary to realise them. In developing these ideas, I will focus first on Bowie's subversion of social norms as a precondition of love, freedom. I will then turn to consider three important lessons evident in Bowie's work, ones that speak to love. Love as letting go, love as humility, and love as post-human. Sorry. As philosopher Simon Critchley has noted, Bowie's music is about yearning, and ultimately it is a yearning for love. It is Bowie's yearning for love that touches us, speaks to us the most profoundly. It disarms as it disorientates. It makes us aware of our own deep longing for transcendence of self and connection with others, for the creation of spaces large enough for love to enter. Our yearnings, which of course pre-exist Bowie, are drawn to the surface through his music, or at least the best of his music. Listen to this part of Sweet Thing Reprise, which provides a dramatic example. Moreover, through Bowie, through the worlds he describes and inhabits, our yearnings become attached to possible presents and futures. That is, Bowie enlarges our worlds. While our understanding of our world, our place in it, our life possibilities, are inextricably tied up with ideology, its internalization, its effective concretization in through us, Bowie breaks the spell. And because capitalism always recuperates subversive acts, the thin white magician must always stay a step ahead. Hence Bowie's endlessly playful reinventions. An ethic of love is implicit in such activity as demystification lays the ground for human flourishing. It enables freedom to take shape. And the strange worlds Bowie conjured up brought the non-inevitability of the ordinary, the everyday, into sharp relief. His music and art helped release us from necessity, that is, from social expectations that appear natural, ones that can be experienced as prosaic and at times deadening. That is, Bowie triggered an existential revelation in some fans, especially those who realised love is always the possibility of being present at the birth of a world. It is this opening of a crack in the sky that helps explain why Bowie remains such an enduring presence in many fans' lives. Loving others involves loving them in flux. It requires embracing change, their process of becoming. This, of course, can be painful. It is a lesson Bowie would give time and again through killing off objects of fan love. While rock stars like The Who's Pete Townsend confined auto-destructive art to smashing up guitars on stage, Bowie, with much less fanfare, and usually in the very moment of musical and artistic triumph, always turned it on himself. That is, he committed serial ritual suicide. He set the template for doing so with Ziggy. He then repeated the move with a series of characters. Through the metaphorical killing of selves, Bowie chose difference over identity, love over law, surprise over the cult of repetition against which Badiou warns. To be a Bowie fan, then, is to mourn, to let go, and to learn to love again. And to become aware, this process will be repeated without end. Through symbolic practices of death and rebirth, Bowie dramatised the fleeting quality of attachment, his takeaway message being embrace impermanence warmly. Or, to put it another way, he encouraged us to accept change in others and ourselves, in our life journeys, as a precondition of love, and to do so as an act of faith, for we can never truly know the other. This is not an easy thing, of course. In the musical context, one thinks of the cries of Judas, Bob Dylan faced at Manchester's Free Trade Hall in 1966, when he exchanged acoustic for electric guitar. Bowie encountered the problem less due to the rapidity of his changes. But change is always unsettling for most fans and lovers. Bowie encourages us to embrace this change and the pain it necessarily entails, though he offered the consolation that the journey would never be dull. In other words, Bowie alludes to the fact love is a risk, but that without risk, there can be no love. And the risk we must take is to let go of ourselves and others, again and again. Thus, Bowie love requires us to abandon fixed ideas about ourselves and others, and to embrace their vulnerability in the service of what may come. It is a love that requires patience, duration, and commitment. A love that affords us a different, and in my view, better way of lasting in life. Sorry. I'll just leave that there for a second. Take a breath. The effacement of self, a reining in of the ego, is also apparent in Bowie's foregrounding of humility. In the Christian sense, humility means recognition of the self in its relation to God. in a non-religious sense, it signifies an unselfing, a shedding, a paring back. For the purposes of this lecture, we will focus on two interrelated ways humility comes to the fore in Bowie's work. First, we will consider Bowie's ambivalent relationship with organised religion, especially Christianity. Second, we will consider, via the Heathen album, his concern regarding the hubris of men. Bowie's interest in organised religion, Tibetan Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, and his spiritual quest more generally, Gnosticism, Kabbalah, and other forms of mysticism, are searching for some kind of meta-connection, appears to have been present from the start. We encounter it first on Silly Boy Blue, with its reference to the Tibetan mountains of Lhasa, and on Karma Man. On the song The Supermen, he alludes to the tragic nature of omnipotence, to the inability of the gods to call time on their own lives. On Quicksand, he references occultist Aleister Crowley.
I'm closer to the golden dawn, immersed in Crowley's uniform.
Later, on Station to Station, he refers to Hermetic Kabbalah. Christianity, in particular, proves to be a recurring theme in Bowie's work. And it is in relation to Christianity that we see a repulsion, attraction dynamic most in play. Thus, we can contrast the persistent and intimate prayer-like quality of some of Bowie's lyrics with his cynicism regarding the actual practices of the Holy Church. In relation to the former, listen to this part of Word on a Wing. We witness cynicism first on the song Holy, Holy. And we hear it again on 5 Years, where we are introduced to the cop who knelt and kissed the feet of the priest, and to the queer who threw up at the sight of that. Bowie's distrust of the Holy Church is again in evidence on the song Loving the alien being a metaphor for God. Here, Bowie's subject is the Crusades, the Templars and the Saracens, and the political savagery implicit in claims to Christian faith. Or, as Bowie puts it, more recently, on the accompanying video to the song The Next Day, Bowie presents a decadent and corrupted priesthood. They can work with Satan, or they dress like saints. As Simon Critchley has noted, Bowie's obsession with and opposition to the Christian Church appears to be founded on the view that it has fraudulently co-opted, branded, marketed, and moralized the experience of transcendence. It is against this arrogance of the church that Bowie railed, against the hierarchy and power that get in the way of the spiritual, and therefore love. In the face of its eviscerating laws, Bowie demands, "Give me your freedom of spirit." However, Bowie's call for greater love-directed humility led him to having more than organised religion in his sights. He also railed against contemporary man. This concern, perhaps, receives its clearest expression on his Heathen album. As he explained, he used the term heathen to refer to the unilluminated mind, to somebody who has lowered his standards spiritually, intellectually, morally. Someone who's not even bothered searching for a spiritual life anymore, who completely exists on a materialistic plane. Bowie's heathen, then, refers to those who have substituted the God who has died with themselves. Those who have embraced the ordinary or banal. Those who scream, I don't want knowledge, I want certainty. Thus, Bowie's heathen is hubristic, but also materially consumptive and happiness directed. In musical terms, think Phil Collins, Coldplay, or the dreadful, really, really dreadful Bono. In the face of such profanity, Bowie yearns for connection, for love. And of course, we yearn with him. Bowie often strikes this chord. Thus in Berlin, when Bowie introduced the song Heathen with the following heartfelt plea.
God bless us! Please, God bless us!
He was not literally referring to a god, rather he was speaking to outsiders with whom he identified and who identify with him, and expressing the hope that we are not heathen. That is, he was inviting us to move beyond our ego-centered selves in the service of a love realizable only through an embrace of difference. That is, like Badiou, Bowie recognized love to be an opportunity to enjoy a positive, creative, affirmative experience of difference. Bowie's emphasis on humility, his privileging of otherness over self, comes through in his work generally, though it is perhaps rendered most explicit on his final song, I Can't Give Everything Away. With these loving and parting words, Bowie appears to allude to a self receding from view, feeling less, and to otherness coming into ever sharper relief, seeing more. In developing the idea of agape, of unconditional love, Bowie's privileging of otherness over self can also be seen in his embrace of the post-human. Post-humanism offers a critique of humanism, its underlying assumptions and limits. It recognizes our imperfectibility and embraces our manifestation through difference. Rather than thinking about the post-human as a loss of cognitive and moral self-mastery, as humanism does, Rosie Bradiotti argues that it enables us to understand the fluidity and multiplicity of our identities. But more than this, as Donna Haraway argues, it emphasizes that it is our affinity, not identity, that matters most. As long ago as 1976, Bowie declared... Sorry, got a bit trigger happy there, sorry. Let's repeat that. As long ago as 1976, Bowie declared he always had a repulsive desire to be something more than human. Once again, as we so often do with Bowie in his 20s, we hear the voice of Nietzsche. However, Bowie's desire to move beyond human should not be understood as a desire to assume the place of God. As we have already seen, this is something Bowie rejected, especially in his later work. Rather, Bowie's desire for something more is a desire to escape the monotonous, the mundane, a desire he pursued through his characters, music, and art. He also did so through films, performing roles that were not human, or only partly so. We recall, for example, Thomas Jerome Newton, the character Bowie played in The Man Who Fell to Earth. Bowie's performance of the Elephant Man and the vampire he played in The Hunger. In this part of the lecture, however, I will take up the theme of love as post-human through Bowie's playfulness with human-animal hybridity. This dyad, which pulls at the seams of the human in a particular way, is perhaps first rendered apparent through his 1971 Egyptian Sphinx photo shoot with Brian Ward, where Bowie posed as half man, half lion. However, as I'm sure many of you will be aware, human-animal hybridity comes to the fore most starkly through his 1974 Diamond Dogs album cover, where Bowie appears as half man, half dog. The cover is striking. Bowie appears powerful and defiant, delighting in the celebration of hybridity, in being one of the strangest living curiosities, as the accompanying text declares. If there is disgust, there is also recognition and desire. The image points to perhaps the central taboo in Western culture. Thou shalt not mix species, which of course is a prohibition against bestiality. The image is provocative, however, not primarily because of bestial possibilities, but because it serves to remind us of our inability to distinguish between human and animal, and because it points to our own animality. The distinction between human and animal has been important in defining the contours of humanity, in rendering us human. Yet anxiety concerning the distinction is long-standing. It can, in the West, be dated to the late Middle Ages. Anxiety over perceived porousness between human and animal became more pronounced with the passage of time and the discomforting findings of science. And as Donna Haraway notes, by the end of the 20th century, the boundary between human and animal was thoroughly breached. The specialness of Homo sapiens at the biological level has become even more suspect since the findings of the Human Genome Project, which push an already fragile idea of human close to breaking point. And yet, in the face of this crisis of the human, we should not be alarmed. The human was always already a construct that not only divided us from other species, but from each other and ourselves. Behind the lie of ontological purity, whose logical end is always disturbing and sometimes leads to the death camp, lies the beautiful truth of hybridity. Metaphorically and artistically, Bowie points the way. In the face of taboo, the royal no, he always seemed to say yes. Yes to difference. Yes to mixture. Yes to connection. As Simon Critchley notes, what Bowie seemed to offer was an absolute and unconditional affirmation of life in all of its chaotic complexity, but also its moments of transport and delight. And after all, if we can embrace the hybrid, the monster, the post-human, do we not guarantee the livability and lovability of every life? Bowie love, or his ethical relation to difference, might be expressed in Judith Butler's terms as a refusal to foreclose the challenge difference delivers. Like Butler, Bowie invites us to learn to live in the anxiety of that challenge, to feel the surety of one's epistemological and ontological anchor go, but be willing, in the name of the human, to become something other than what it is traditionally assumed to be. In this lecture, we have considered the theme of love as agape. It is an important, indeed central theme, cascading through Bowie's work. Crucially, Bowie love lies in an ethical relation that prioritizes otherness over self, love over law. As Critchley, quoting poet Anne Carson, has noted, love dares the self to leave itself behind in order that something new can come into being. In proceeding in this way, Bowie constituted the ground for an ethical freedom for himself and others. After all, as Foucault points out, ethics is the considered form that freedom takes when it is informed by reflection. And of course, proper reflection leads one to difference, to the other, and therefore to love. In other words, in the face of difference, what ultimately rings out in Bowie's work is a resounding yes. As Critchley puts it, I'll give him the final word, his music yearned for and allowed us to imagine new forms of being together, new intensities of desire and love in keener visions and sharper sounds. Amen.